Welcome to End Goals, an LCMS Youth Ministry podcast. I'm host Reverend Mark Kiesling, and I'm with DCE Juliana Schultz. And we are here to bring parents, church workers, and lay leaders discussions and resources to help your youth ministry meet its end goal, which is young people who are disciples of Jesus Christ for life. Today, we are kicking off an ongoing series, Starter Pack for Youth Ministry, and talking about how to engage and utilize supportive adults in youth ministry.
We are going to bring you something a little different than how we've been handling the podcast in the past. This is a series of podcasts that are going to come out one right after another, designed to sort of jumpstart anyone who is new to youth ministry, or as a reminder on planning and best practices for those of you that have been around for a while. We know that most people who are doing youth ministry are volunteers who are really busy, and so we wanted to help you out, even if you don't necessarily have a lot of specialized youth ministry training.
And we wanted youth leaders to be able to think about maybe key logistics and developments as you think about developing healthy youth ministry. You can come back and listen to these anytime or send them to someone who is just getting started. And if you want to know more about what healthy youth ministry looks like, you can listen to our series on the 7 practices of healthy youth ministry as well.
One of those, as we talked about before, is supportive adults. Supportive adults are a part of healthy youth ministry. You can go back and listen to how we talked about that in the context of those 7 practices. But to give you a quick recap, we know that when young people have 5 supportive, Christ-centered adults who they can trust and talk to, even about difficult things, they have a better chance of remaining in the church. Supportive adults build relationships where those adults can listen and know that young person, and it allows them to be able to apply law and gospel appropriately as they walk alongside that young person through good times and bad times, and they earn the right to be trusted and heard.
And supportive adults can be family, extended family, people at church, church workers, even those who are not necessarily connected to youth ministry. It could even be supportive Christian teachers in their public high school that are investing in young people and showing care for them. Now, today, we are going to focus on those supportive adults that are in your youth ministry and in your church. Just some basic things about how to recruit and train and support those volunteers in your youth ministry and their role as supportive adults for young people in their walk with Jesus. We hope that through the discussion, we will answer 2 important questions. First, why is finding and supporting the right adults for youth ministry so important? Secondly, what can make this a difficult task? And hopefully we can provide some insight into those questions or give some questions for you to consider as you engage volunteers. So let's get into that discussion of some of the key things to consider or questions to ask.
So why is finding and supporting the right adults for youth ministry so important? Well, to start with, you can't do this alone. Youth ministry is a team effort, and it requires lots of other adults. And just like any other area of ministry, youth ministry needs you to find the right kind of volunteer, the right match of gifts and skills and passions and experience to what you're doing within your youth ministry. So you can identify adults who care for young people. You definitely want them to like teenagers, hopefully, not just somebody who tolerates them, but who really enjoys spending time with them, who's well rooted in their faith, somebody who is in worship, is in Bible study, is constantly learning and developing their understanding of their baptismal faith. And it's not just a position you want to fill with a warm body just because that's it. You have to keep a certain ratio or you have to have a certain number of drivers. Because while that adult might be helpful in that moment, they aren't going to be able to help fill out that supportive adult role that we really want to devise within healthy youth ministry.
One of the things that we kind of described about maybe that culture or atmosphere of youth ministry that young people are able to connect and feel invited into, feel welcomed. The words we use were warmth, challenge, and grace, and that's a part of our 7 practices piece that you can listen to on other podcasts. And maybe a way that we kind of thought of how to boil that down into a practical sense is to think about maybe the temperament or a temperament description of a key volunteer. And we thought maybe use the fruits of the Spirit as one of those areas that you can kind of look for and be lifting up as an area in which young volunteers can be hoping to obtain when they connect with young people. And so how do we show our faith as we walk with them and in our own personal lives as well?
Yeah, you want them to be good examples of what Christ-centered living looks like as they get older, right? And somebody who genuinely cares for them. But that kind of recruitment is hard, right?
Yeah.
Recruiting other volunteers and supportive adults to be a part of your youth ministry is not an easy task, and often that's something we hear a lot from lead youth leaders is saying like, I can't get that team together. And one of the ways I would encourage you to think about that is don't just wait until a certain time of year or around a key event, or until it's that time of year where we're electing a new board, whatever that is.
Right.
Uh, be constantly on the lookout for who is interacting with teenagers in your narthex before and after the service. Who do they talk about when they talk about people within the context of their congregation? Who around you seems to exemplify, as Mark said, those fruits of the Spirit in a way that makes you think that they'd be a good fit for your youth ministry.
Always great times to plant seeds with volunteers. A second key that I want to lift up is that as you find those new volunteers and support them, clearly state expectations and communicate what you need. As with in anything in ministry or in work or family relationship, good communication and healthy expectations help to keep the adult leader and the volunteers over the long haul. So again, as you start to invest in them, want to be real clear on what the expectations are for the position with that long view of the importance of long-term relationships that can happen between adults and youth.
Right. So as you're recruiting for that adult in your youth ministry who's going to help out, don't hide what the expectations are going to be, or how much time it's going to take, or what you're hoping that they will contribute to the ministry. You want to uh, make sure that they know all of those different pieces. What are their expectations? What are the support pieces they're going to get? And because you don't want to recruit somebody who loves young people, who has all the right gifts and skills, but doesn't have the time to commit or can't commit to certain expectations. So keep it reasonable, but be upfront so that they can make that commitment, knowing that they can give what they need to your youth ministry.
Flexibility is always important in youth ministry, but you don't want to bait and switch.
Right, exactly.
Be up as much up front as possible. Um, Another thing that we talk about too is it's great to give them a learning opportunity so that they grow and develop. Just because they're a volunteer doesn't mean they don't want training. And the more equipped they are, the better they're going to be able to step into those roles of key volunteer roles and to create safe environments, great learning opportunities. And so that's a wonderful way too that you can show support for your volunteers.
And if you can't necessarily take all of them to a fantasy training, maybe be sure to communicate with them and debrief after events. This helps keep people focused on what's important to help your youth ministry grow. So for me, often it meant making sure that my adult leaders hung out just for a few minutes after an event, and we went through a routine of certain questions that we would ask. What went well, what didn't go well, any problems that we spotted, anything that we need to know about going forward. How would we switch things up and do it differently if we could do it again? And it gave them both time to give me feedback
Right?
on, something that I didn't see or didn't catch that didn't go well, or that went really well that we should do again. But it also gave them a chance to see where they could be more participatory the next time we did it, or to take on a greater sense of leadership the next event that we had.
Absolutely. Another key thing that we want to focus on when we're engaging volunteers is to remind them of the incredible value they bring to youth ministry as they support young people and keep those on the margins connected as well. Is that's where those key relationships can be so important for young people. And a part of supporting volunteers is continuing to remind them, encourage them as they serve. It can be real easy with everything going on that volunteers can lose their focus or get frustrated. And so, like, whether it's some of the things Juliana just talked about in terms of the debriefing and the communication can just be a natural part of that. But then, really, that thanks is a part of that too. That it's so easy that we might feel that in our hearts and minds, but we sometimes don't say it. And sometimes it's important just to say it, encourage it. If you get a chance to do it publicly, is a great way too. So, to make sure that we're showing our thanks for those volunteers that are giving of their time and effort to support our young people.
Yeah, everybody likes to hear a thank you. Everybody likes to hear an encouragement. And I don't think we do that nearly enough in our churches for the people who are volunteering in all aspects of
Mm-hmm.
ministry. And recognizing that pastors, DCEs, and other staff members can't be the supportive adult for every young person in their church, right? We have limitations as well. And a variety of youth ministry volunteers means that more young people are able to be connected, more young people are able to be remembered, to have an adult who knows something about them, who is responding to celebrations they have, or transitions they have, or crisis they have, even when staff cannot. So often, other adult leaders are the ones who are remembering key football games
Yeah.
when I'm not necessarily tracking that, or reminding about birthdays when maybe that's not necessarily always the first thing on a staff person's mind. A staff person can't be at every game or play, but a supportive adult can help be that person. And so when we're asking, you certainly have to put that in the expectations up front if you're asking them to do things like outside of maybe
Hmm.
your weekly or monthly programming. But the more that you're able to engage them on that, the more young people you are able to connect and to know about and to have that supportive adult who walks alongside them.
Absolutely. And one specific thing we saw in some research that we did with LCMS congregations and young people too, was to be thinking about when you have a pastor or DCE or other staff person leave, to try to really have for the people of God, the other adults in those relational connections, to help people on the margins stay connected so they don't get lost in the relational shuffle. So having youth ministry volunteers who were connected before and they can be connected during that time of transition and after as well can be very important for young people to know that the church cares for them, that they're walking through this transition with them, and to be that communication area too, whether it's a new staff person coming on or maybe there's going to be some shifts in how youth ministry is going to be done. That relational connection is so important that there's follow up and again, a familiar face and a familiar voice who's speaking to them. And that can just be really a great opportunity to connect young people to their church too, as there might be some transition on the staffing side.
Yeah, youth ministry volunteers are so critical. And the reason we think this is a core piece of us understanding that is to put the right team together of supportive adults who are going to engage all the young people in your ministry at different levels and to be there to work alongside you, to team with you, to do that healthy youth ministry. One of the things I love is that youth ministry volunteers really help me to see young people with different eyes.
Mm,
There's
yeah,
always
right.
young people that maybe I'm a little more drawn to, and some that just rub me the wrong way. It's just always going to be the case, right? Or they're able, or I see one thing that's happening in our ministry about that young person that I focus on, and youth ministry volunteers help identify so many different gifts and skills, so many different passions. They're able to have different conversations. They're able to look at what's going on with different eyes, and can be super helpful in identifying where that young person might be ready for service or leadership or even church work. So it's so important to have a variety of volunteers who are able to engage as a team to help really develop that supportive adult system within your youth ministry.
Absolutely. So we spent some time here now talking about the benefits of volunteers, recruiting them, keeping them engaged, and just so many ways that they bless ministry within our congregations and support the life of a young person. So, Juliana, let's change gears here a little bit. Have there's some open conversation about this as well. But there is that side too that comes up about there's work to be done for sure, and sometimes it can be difficult to do that. So, we want to talk about that. What can make finding supportive adult volunteers difficult?
I think one of the ways that it becomes difficult is when we get very focused in on who we think or who we assume will
Mm,
be good in youth ministry. And that can look like a lot of different things. So, sometimes in a church, it's that we assume that because there's a young adult in the church, that young person wants to automatically be a part of a youth leader, right? And sometimes that's true. Sometimes
sure.
they are the right fit, right? You do want to engage young adults in youth leadership because I think, or in youth ministry, because I think it does help teens conceptualize what it looks like to be a Christ-centered young adult, which is easier for them to conceptualize than being a parent or grandparents, right? So young adults are important to have as a part of your youth ministry, but that young adult may or may not have the gifts, the skills, the passions to be in youth ministry.
Hmm.
So you don't want to just assume because they're a young person, the automatic spot for them is going to be youth ministry. Uh, and then also, the reverse of that is I hear a lot of older adults say, "Oh, I couldn't possibly do youth ministry. I'm too old for youth ministry. I can't do that anymore." And the reality is, that often older adults can be incredibly powerful volunteers within youth ministry. Certainly, they may or may not be playing dodgeball or riding in a bus for 14 hours. Depends on your older adult. Um, but they have this wealth of wisdom and understanding and life experience that young people can really respect, and they're able to mentor and build relationships with young people in a really powerful way. So don't just assume because of an age that we're gonna find the right volunteers, because that's not always the case.
Absolutely. I think another thing too, depending on maybe what the context for your youth ministry is, ask the young people who they think would be a good adult leader to lead youth ministry, and there might be some relational connections you're not aware of through different aspects. Maybe it's through the public school, maybe it's through other areas, and that they really want to be more connected to another adult as a mentor or a connection, or just people who have great gifts that may not pop up maybe in what you see in your connection with them on a Sunday morning or whenever it may be. So ask youth for people that they look up to and respect. And I think this goes back to what you said earlier too, is about that also then helps you maybe get that variety of people who connect with a variety of young people in different ways. So then you're maybe going to find that coach that you didn't know was coaching a sport and that can relate with athletes, or the nerds, or those who are in the music maybe in different ways that you didn't know had gifts that way. And what a way to lift them up and create relational
Right.
connections between young people. And so it just adds to the value and diversity of what you have with supportive adults.
So, youth ministry functions best when it has adults who are willing to commit to the long term. When you are looking to find and recruit volunteers for your youth ministry, you are looking for them not to be just committed to a single event or for a short term. You're looking for them to be committed weeks, months, years. The longer, the better, because we know that long term relationship is really important. Now, youth ministry for a season can be really great, but healthy youth ministry is really trying to locate people who can be in it for the long run, and that can really be difficulty in recruitment. Is recruiting not just for the short term but for the long run, and so that takes a little bit of time to make sure that you're telling people how they're going to be supportive, what the expectations are going to be, what that volunteer role is going to look like, so they're clear, and they know how that long term relationship is really going to have the bigger impact, and see the overall value of having that long term commitment. But that can be a real difficulty to talk adults into committing
Right.
to.
Right. And I think the other places we probably talked about even what that structure is, and that comes into that expectation thing. So we've seen churches that might say, hey, in third grade, we're going to have these adults stick with these third graders all the way through confirmation, all the way through high school, and you build these relationships over years. Or again, you might have your consistent, like these are our high school folks, and they know what their expectations are for the relationship or the desire and how you maintain those relationships. But two, I mean, to think how relationships work and how those relationships can go beyond even that high school time into young adulthood and other areas, just because we're Christians, we're the body of Christ, we support our young people. So you think about how just things naturally can happen through relationships too, because we care for people. But even like you said, drawing that out into kind of maybe what does that engagement look like from an expectation standpoint can be really helpful for volunteers, so they know what the expectation is and what the commitment level is.
Yeah, we're going to harp on this a lot, especially because as we talk to lay leaders and congregations, often I hear them say, "Oh, well, these kids are so sick of me. I've been around
Yeah,
for 5, 10, 15 years doing youth ministry, and no, they're not sick of you. This is it's like one of the most important things you can do is be around for that long.
yeah,
Please stick with it, and how can we encourage you to stick with it, and how can you see the value in what you're doing?" And I think one of the ways that you can engage that relationship, one of the powerful ways that you can engage that relationship is utilizing some big events like district or national events to help deepen that relationship that can last beyond that event. We're going to talk about that more in later weeks, but certainly for me, came to my congregation in Chicago, and within a month had done our mission trip with our young people, and sort of jumped right in. And at the time was a little terrifying. Didn't know any of the kids, didn't know their names, didn't know any of the adult leaders I was working with, and the adult leaders had been around for a while. But ultimately, like, it was a great relationship builder, and it really sped up my introduction process to those young people. Knew their names, knew their schools, knew what they were excited about, knew some gifts and skills, much faster than I would have if I had to wait another year before we started that event. So certainly those can help facilitate some really key relationships. And like I said, we'll be talking more about that later.
That's great. One of the last things too we want to talk about, and what can be difficult, but yet it can be a beautiful thing too, in terms of those volunteers who serve in a variety of ways, is to know when it's time for an adult to move out of youth ministry, but still maintain their supportive adult status. So certainly we talked about that. There's one side that Juliana said. There's those that, man, we want to keep engaging and supporting in their work with young people, and they're there. But there might be times things in life change, seasons in life change, and there might be a time for them to move out of that youth ministry time of volunteering and support, and to have a good conversation with them. But for them to understand, man, just being invested in young people, being supportive, being there on Sunday morning to know them by name or to greet them and show love and care, to be praying for them, that is an important role of a supportive adult. And so that we encourage them to never forget about the importance of that, and to find ways to engage them around even those, again, that may be secondary network of adults who are supporting young people that may not be doing the events, may not be involved in a week-to-week basis, but boy, they are an important part of building up young people and supporting them in their life in Christ.
And when you can do that really well, sometimes youth ministry is one of those places where people get sucked back in when the time is back right again. If you are able to say to an adult, hey, we want you to continue to be supportive of our youth ministry, these are the ways that you can do it. And when you're able and willing, please come back. I've seen congregations where a youth leader has had a powerful impact, been super active for a time, taken a step back, continue to be that supportive adult, and man, does youth ministry bring them back again and again and again. Because especially when you have the right people in the right places, and that's where their heart is, you want to be able to be both flexible and willing to kind of meet them where they're at, and then continue to draw them back as that's possible for them. Really important stuff, talking about how we engage supportive adults as volunteers in your youth ministry, building that team, finding the right people, engaging them in the right ways, communicating with them well, and helping them to commit to the long term. Not an easy job by any stretch of the imagination, but again, one of those key base things that everybody who does youth ministry is going to have to do at some level. And so we know that this can be a great opportunity for you to build and form that team around healthy youth ministry that's really going to help your young people as they grow. So a couple of closing challenges for you to think about as you look to engage those volunteers. How are you recruiting not just warm bodies, but supportive adults to your youth ministry? And how might you expand your search, maybe beyond where you've looked before, to older generations or to people you maybe wouldn't have considered before?
Another challenge is to consider, how do you communicate with volunteers? Do they know the plan and expectations you have?
And then how can you support long-term volunteers to keep and build relationships as churches transition and as they might transition out of volunteering for your youth ministry? Important questions as we continue to pray for you as you raise up supportive adults in your youth ministry. As we said, not an easy task, but an important one, and we pray that God has gifted you with an amazing team of adults who are all passionate about developing healthy youth ministry in your congregation.
Thanks again for joining us. If you like the podcast, don't forget to subscribe and give us a positive review. It helps other people find us. End Goals Podcast is a production of LCMS Youth Ministry and KFUO Radio. To find out more about LCMS Youth Ministry or to find links to resources mentioned, go to kfuo.org/youthministry. Thank you for listening and caring for the young people of our church.